Shocking split. Are Tiffany Bates and Lawson Bates headed for divorce? For years, fans believed Lawson and Tiffany Bates were the perfect example of love, faith, and togetherness. Every photo, every post, every smile seemed to echo the same message: forever. But sometimes, forever doesn't last the way it's promised. Behind the warm smiles and picture-perfect moments, silence had started to grow. A silence that spoke louder than any words could. First, no one noticed. They were still appearing together, holding hands at events, sharing family gatherings, and posting small glimpses of happiness online. But the sparkle in their eyes was fading. Tiffany's laughter wasn't as bright. Lawson's music felt heavier, his words slower, as if every lyric carried a hidden pain. Those close to them started to feel it, the distance that neither of them wanted to name. Nights grew longer, conversations shorter. Their home, once filled with laughter and guitar tunes, had turned into a quiet space where love was still present, but peace was gone. Tiffany tried to hold on. She prayed, she hoped. She smiled even when her heart was breaking. There were nights she sat by the window, scrolling through old pictures, remembering their first days together. The wedding, the promises, the dreams they built. But memory can be cruel when reality no longer matches it. Lawson too was torn inside. Music had always been his way of healing, but even the songs started to sound empty. He would play late into the night, hoping that somewhere between the chords, he'd find the version of love they had lost. But every note reminded him of how far they'd drifted apart. They both tried to fix what was broken without admitting that it was breaking. But love cannot survive on effort alone. It needs warmth, understanding, forgiveness, and sometimes, even that isn't enough. Slowly, the walls began to rise between them. Smiles became formal, words became careful. The sparkle of new beginnings had turned into the ache of holding on too long. And one evening, when the Tennessee sun set behind the hills, Tiffany finally whispered what she had feared for months. Maybe love isn't the same anymore. Lawson looked at her, the woman who had once been his entire world, and for the first time he didn't know what to say. In that silence, everything changed. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet between Lawson and Tiffany grew heavier, like a storm that refused to break but kept darkening the sky. They lived under the same roof, yet in two different worlds. The house still looked perfect from the outside, but inside the warmth had vanished. Every smile had a shadow, every touch had hesitation. Tiffany would wake up early and stand by the kitchen window, watching the sunrise that once brought her peace. Now, it only reminded her how long the nights had become. She used to make coffee for both of them, 2 cups side by side, but now there was just one. The other cup stayed empty, untouched, just like the space between them. Lawson, meanwhile, poured himself into his music. Studio nights became longer. Lyrics became sadder. His songs spoke of lost faith, fading light, and broken dreams. Things he never said out loud, but bled into every melody. Fans thought his music had matured, but they didn't see the truth. He was singing about his own heartbreak. Whenever Tiffany heard his songs online, she would close her eyes. The words felt like conversations that never happened. Every lyric a confession, every chorus a cry for something they both couldn't fix. There were moments, small fleeting ones, when they tried to pretend things were normal. Dinner with family, Sunday church, smiles for photos. But those smiles never reached their eyes anymore. Even the Bates family noticed the distance, though no one dared to ask. Everyone hoped it was just a phase. But deep inside, Tiffany knew. She could feel love slipping away like sand through her fingers. She tried talking, really talking, but every conversation ended the same way. Lawson would look away, lost in thought, and say softly, "I just need time." And she would nod, even though time was exactly what was pulling them apart. The breaking point came one rainy night. The air was heavy, the room dimly lit. Tiffany stood by the door, suitcase half-packed, her eyes swollen from crying. Lawson sat at the table, his hands shaking, trying to find the right words. "So, this is really happening? It's been happening for a long time, Lawson. We just didn't want to see it." He looked at her, the woman he had written love songs for, the one he thought he'd grow old with, and for a moment he wanted to stop her. To hold her, to fight, to promise that they could fix it. But deep down he knew this wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. Neither did I. But maybe staying like this hurts more than letting go. The silence after that felt endless. Only the sound of rain filled the room, like the world outside was mourning with them. Tiffany placed her wedding ring on the table, gentle, almost tenderly, and whispered, "I'll always wish it could have been different." She walked toward the door. Lawson didn't stop her. He just watched her leave, tears quietly streaming down his face, as the door closed softly finally. And just like that, the melody ended. That night, Lawson played his guitar again, but this time no words came out. Only a trembling tune that echoed through the empty house. A house that once held laughter, love, and dreams of forever. In that music there was no beginning or end. Just a heart quietly breaking, and a love story slowly fading into memory. The morning after Tiffany left, the Bates home felt heavier than ever before. The sunlight still poured through the curtains, but it didn't feel warm anymore. It felt empty, like the light had lost its purpose. Lawson sat at the edge of the bed, the same spot where they once laughed and planned their future together. Her side was still perfectly made, untouched. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, lavender and tears. He closed his eyes, wishing he could stop time, go back to when everything made sense. Downstairs the house was quiet. No humming in the kitchen, no soft footsteps, no gentle laughter. Just silence, the kind that hurts to hear. He picked up his guitar but couldn't play. Every string reminded him of her voice, her laughter, her way of listening. Music had always been his safe place, but now it only brought back ghosts. Meanwhile, miles away, Tiffany sat alone in a small rented apartment. The first night without him had been unbearable. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking clock as if it were counting the moments of her broken heart. The walls were cold, the bed felt strange. But for the first time in months there was peace, a painful kind of peace born from finally letting go. She scrolled through old photos, wedding pictures, road trips, concerts, moments of pure joy, and tears blurred her vision. Every photo looked perfect, but only she knew the loneliness behind those smiles. In her diary she wrote softly, "Maybe we were two people who loved too much but understood too little. Maybe love isn't about forever, but about the courage to walk away when it's breaking you." Days turned into weeks and slowly the world began to notice. Fans whispered online, noticing they weren't appearing together anymore. No couple photos, no comments, no likes. The silence between them spoke louder than any statement could. Rumors spread, some cruel, some sympathetic. But neither Lawson nor Tiffany said a word. They both stayed silent, protecting what little dignity their love still had left. Lawson began avoiding the spotlight. He stopped posting, stopped attending events. His music studio lights stayed off for weeks. Even his family noticed the change, his once vibrant smile replaced by quiet sadness. His mother, Kelly Jo, tried to reach him, but he just shook his head. "I just need some time, Mom," he whispered, the same words he once told Tiffany. Tiffany, too, withdrew from the world. She focused on simple things, morning walks, prayer, journaling, trying to heal piece by piece. But every so often, she'd see a video of Lawson singing and break all over again. His voice still had the power to reach her heart. Even now, even after everything. One night, Lawson returned to the stage for a small concert. He didn't speak much. He simply said, "This one's for anyone who's ever loved and lost, and still believes in healing." Then he sang, not as a performer, but as a man who had lived through heartbreak. His voice cracked mid-song and the crowd fell silent. There was no pretending anymore. Everyone could feel the pain, the honesty, the truth. Somewhere across town, Tiffany listened to the same song on her phone, tears streaming down her face. She didn't hate him. She didn't regret loving him. But she knew, some stories aren't meant to have a happy ending. Only a beautiful one that hurts to remember. Their love had ended, but the memories remained gentle, bittersweet, forever echoing through the melodies they once shared. Months had passed since Tiffany closed the door behind her for the last time. The world had moved on, but for Lawson and Tiffany time stood still. Like two hearts still beating in separate worlds, haunted by what once was. Tiffany's mornings began in silence. No alarm set by a familiar hand, no smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, no warm voice humming through the hallway. She had learned to live alone, not out of choice but out of necessity. Every morning she opened the window to let the light in, whispering a small prayer to stay strong. Her apartment was simple. Walls bare, furniture minimal but peaceful. A new start built on broken foundations. Some days she felt brave. Other days she couldn't stop crying. Healing isn't a straight road. It's a path filled with memories that refuse to fade. She would scroll through social media and see Lawson's face, smiling in old photos, performing in videos that fans kept sharing. Every picture was a reminder of what they used to be, and every memory felt like a wound reopening. Yet something inside her had changed. The pain wasn't just about losing him anymore. It was about finding herself again. She began painting, something she had stopped years ago. Each brushstroke carried pieces of her story. Love, loss, and quiet strength. On some nights, she painted the sunset over the Tennessee hills, the same one they used to watch together. But now the sky looked different. It belonged to her again. Meanwhile, miles away, Lawson's life had become a blur of soundchecks, tours, and empty hotel rooms. On stage he smiled, off stage he fell apart. The crowd cheered for him, but the applause couldn't fill the silence that followed after every show. He had started writing again, not for fame, not for fans, but for survival. Each song became a confession, a way to speak to her without actually speaking. The lyrics were raw, filled with regret and longing. One night, during a late recording session, his friend asked him quietly, "Do you still think about her?" Lawson looked away, eyes glistening under the studio light. "Every time I breathe." He didn't hate Tiffany, he could never. He hated the silence, the distance, the small choices that built walls they couldn't climb over. He replayed their last conversation in his mind again and again, wondering if a different word, a softer tone, could have changed everything. Back in her apartment, Tiffany received an envelope in the mail one day. No sender's name, just familiar handwriting. Inside was a small note and a CD. The note read, "I wrote this song the night you left. It's not about sadness, it's about gratitude. Thank you for loving me even when I forgot how to love myself. L." She held the letter to her chest, tears quietly falling. She played the song. His voice filled the room, gentle, trembling, sincere. Every word carried both closure and affection. It wasn't an apology, it was a goodbye wrapped in love. That night, Tiffany smiled through her tears for the first time in months. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or heartbreak, just acceptance. Sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken, but from learning to live beautifully with the cracks. And for Lawson, that song became his turning point. He began to heal through his art, channeling the pain into purpose. His music touched people who were going through the same. Those who had loved, lost, and were still learning to breathe again. Though they were no longer together, a quiet truth remained between them. Love doesn't vanish, it transforms. It becomes something softer, quieter, wiser. And somewhere between the pain of the past and the calm of the present, both Lawson and Tiffany learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes love's greatest act isn't holding on, but letting go with grace. Time had quietly passed, not fast, not slow, just enough for the ache to soften. Seasons changed. The leaves outside Tiffany's apartment turned gold, then fell away, just like the weight she once carried in her heart. For months, Tiffany had lived with the quiet, learning to find beauty in stillness, strength in solitude. The world had stopped asking questions, and so had she. The noise of heartbreak had faded, replaced by a gentle calm she hadn't felt in years. She no longer cried every night. Some days she even laughed, not because the pain was gone, but because she had learned to live alongside it. Healing, she realized, wasn't forgetting. It was remembering without breaking. Her paintings had started to fill the room now, soft skies, gentle oceans, places that looked peaceful, even when her heart wasn't. People started noticing her art, sharing it, admiring it. One local gallery offered to feature her work in a small exhibit. Tiffany hesitated at first, but then said yes, not to impress the world, but to finally celebrate her journey of becoming whole again. On the day of the exhibit, she stood quietly among her paintings. Strangers admired her work, unaware that every canvas carried her story. Her love, her loss, her healing. One piece caught everyone's attention. A painting of a single chair by a window bathed in sunlight. At the bottom corner, in tiny letters, she had written, "Peace is learning to sit alone and still feel complete." Meanwhile, Lawson's life had changed too. His new songs were softer now. Not heartbreak anthems, but reflections of growth and forgiveness. The pain that once broke him had become the fire that shaped him. He had stopped running from his past and started embracing it. Every lesson, every mistake, every memory. One evening after a long concert tour, Lawson found himself back in Tennessee, the place where everything began and ended. The air was cool, the sky clear, and the stars above felt painfully familiar. He drove past their old home, now empty, silent, yet somehow peaceful. He didn't stop. He just slowed down, looked at the porch light still glowing, and smiled faintly. It wasn't sorrow this time, it was gratitude. He whispered to himself, "Thank you, Tiff, for teaching me what love really means." He returned to his studio later that night and started writing one last song about her. Not about loss, not about pain, but about freedom. The chorus spoke of letting go with kindness, of loving someone enough to wish them happiness, even if it's not with you. The song went viral within days. Fans called it the most beautiful thing he'd ever written. But only Lawson and Tiffany knew who it was truly for. A few weeks later, Tiffany heard the song by accident, playing softly in a cafe as she walked by. She froze, recognizing the voice immediately. For a moment her eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't look away. She listened and smiled. There was no bitterness left. Just peace. Just love reshaped by time and distance. That night she wrote one last letter, not to send but to release. We didn't fail. We loved, we learned, and we became who we were meant to be. Maybe that's the truest form of forever. She folded the letter, placed it in her journal, and looked out the window. The sky was glowing, calm, golden, endless. For the first time, Tiffany didn't feel broken. She felt free. And somewhere across town, Lawson finished his concert, looked up at the same sky, and whispered a quiet prayer. Not for what was lost, but for what had been. Because in the end, not every love story is meant to last. Some are meant to teach. Some are meant to heal. And some are meant to live forever. Not in togetherness, but in memory. The first morning of spring brought a soft warmth to Tennessee, like a gentle whisper that life could start anew. Tiffany stepped out onto her small balcony, inhaling the fresh air. The city hummed quietly below her, a rhythm she hadn't noticed before. It was her first morning without looking back. She had packed away old memories, letters, and photographs that tethered her to the past. Not because she wanted to erase them, but because she had finally learned that living in yesterday only steals today. Her phone buzzed. A message from a close friend inviting her to brunch. She smiled for the first time without a pang of guilt. The world was waiting for her, bright and full of possibilities. Meanwhile, Lawson sat in his studio, surrounded by the soft glow of string lights. The guitar rested against his knee, but this time he wasn't playing a song of heartbreak. He picked up a pen and wrote words that had taken months to form. A tribute, a letter and melody to Tiffany. For every moment we shared, for every lesson you gave me, for every tear and every smile, thank you. I hope you live fully, laugh loudly, and love without fear. You will always have my heart, even from afar. He recorded the song and released it quietly online. It wasn't a hit, it wasn't meant to be. It was a gift, a bridge between two hearts now walking separate paths. Weeks later, Tiffany heard the song. She paused, her breath catching in her throat. Lawson's voice, tender and raw, spoke directly to her soul. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not of sorrow but of gratitude. The ache she once carried had softened into a warm memory. That evening, Tiffany visited a small local park. Children laughed as they ran past, couples strolled hand in hand, and the breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. She closed her eyes and smiled. She was alive. She was free. She was herself again. At the same time, Lawson walked along a quiet street, the sun setting behind him. He paused, looking up at the sky. Somewhere far away, Tiffany was living, breathing, smiling. And for the first time in months, he felt peace. No words were exchanged. No promises were made. They had learned the most difficult truth of love. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to hold someone in your heart forever. The Bates family watched from afar, quietly proud. They had witnessed the heartbreak, the struggles, and the growth of two people who had once promised forever. And now they saw something even more profound: healing, courage, and the quiet beauty of moving forward. As night fell, Tennessee glowed with the soft light of countless homes. Somewhere, Tiffany's laughter mingled with the wind. Somewhere, Lawson's song drifted into the hearts of those who listened. And though their paths would never cross again in the way they once did, their love had transformed into something eternal, not bound by proximity, not limited by time, but alive in memory, music, and the gentle art of moving on. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about holding on. They are about learning to let go, and discovering that love, even after goodbye, can still make the world feel whole. The sun had dipped below the Tennessee horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. The world seemed still, as if holding its breath, witnessing the final chapter of a love story that had touched hearts far beyond its own. Tiffany walked along a quiet lakeside path, her journal tucked under her arm. The soft rustle of leaves and the gentle ripple of water were her companions now, reminders that life moves forward, no matter how heavy the past may feel. She paused by a wooden bench, sitting and opening her journal. Her pen moved gracefully, capturing thoughts she had once been too afraid to voice. I loved, I lost, I learned. I am not broken, I am growing. A small breeze lifted her hair, carrying with it the distant melody of a guitar, familiar, tender, and hauntingly beautiful. It was Lawson's song, the one he had written for her months ago. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, a balm for months of heartache. Across town, Lawson stood on the rooftop of his studio, guitar in hand, watching the same sky. He had poured every ounce of his heart into the song, every word a reflection of the journey he had walked alone, yet forever connected to Tiffany in spirit. He strummed the last chord, a soft, lingering note that seemed to echo across the city. Somewhere in that note was gratitude. Somewhere was love. Somewhere was goodbye. Back at the lake, Tiffany opened her eyes. Her lips curved into a quiet smile, the first that had truly been hers in months. She wasn't just listening to the song. She was feeling it, letting it settle in the corners of her heart that had once ached for him. We were meant to teach each other, not to hold each other forever, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. That night, both Tiffany and Lawson looked at the same stars, distant yet shared. They did not call. They did not reach out. But they were together in a way that mattered more than proximity, in memory, in understanding, and in the peace that only comes after heartbreak has been transformed into wisdom. The Bates family, witnessing from afar, felt the bittersweet beauty of it all. No one was left in anger or regret. Only the quiet recognition that love is strongest not when it clings, but when it lets go with grace. Months later, Tiffany's art was celebrated at a gallery, her work telling stories of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of self-love. Lawson's music inspired thousands, each song a testament to honesty, emotion, and the courage to feel fully, even after pain. And though they walked separate paths, their lives remained intertwined in the invisible threads of memory, lessons, and quiet love. Their story, once filled with laughter, heartbreak, and tears, had become something eternal. A reminder that love does not always mean togetherness, but it always leaves a mark on the soul. The lake reflected the moonlight, the wind carried the softest melodies, and somewhere, two hearts beat quietly, healed but never forgetting. Because some loves do not end. They simply evolve into gratitude, into wisdom, into the silent beauty of having loved at all. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries weight. Tennessee lay under a blanket of stars, each one a silent witness to a love story that had survived its own ending. Tiffany sat by her window, a cup of tea warming her hands. The world outside moved, alive and bright, yet her thoughts traveled through memory, through every laugh, every touch, every song that Lawson had once sung just for her. She didn't cry this time. She smiled softly, a smile that came from deep within. A smile of acceptance, of peace, of gratitude. We loved with everything we had, she whispered, voice trembling. And that was enough. Across town, Lawson walked slowly through the empty streets, the guitar strapped to his back. Each step echoed memories, each chord he hummed carried fragments of their past. He paused under the same sky Tiffany was gazing at, looking at the stars with a quiet reverence. He pulled out his notebook and wrote one last line. Not for the world, not for fans, but for the woman who had once been his entire world. Even in goodbye, you will always be part of me. He strummed his guitar softly, letting the music float through the night. It was not a song of sorrow nor of regret. It was a song of love transformed, of lessons learned, of hearts still beating despite the ache of separation. Tiffany heard the faint melody in the distance, though she knew he was far away. She closed her eyes, letting it wrap around her like a warm embrace she no longer needed to hold. In that moment, all the pain, all the arguments, all the silences melted into understanding. Love, they realized, does not always mean staying. Sometimes it means letting go, and trusting that the bond you shared will live quietly in memory, forever shaping who you are. The Bates family, watching from afar, felt the profound truth of it all. There were no winners or losers, only hearts that had dared to love fully, who had stumbled, healed, and learned to find peace. As the night deepened, Tiffany looked at the moon, and Lawson did the same. Two souls apart in space but united in understanding. Two hearts carrying the same story. Not of loss but of love eternal. And in that quiet, Tennessee breathed softly, the world spinning gently, carrying their story into every heart willing to remember that sometimes, the greatest love is the one that frees you.